Sister Margot, welcome.
Thank you very much.
And thank you for accepting this interview. Are you connected from which country?
From Canada. I live in London, Ontario.
Great, great. How do you resonate with the theme of the plenary, embracing vulnerability on a synodal journey?
Mm-hmm. You know, I thought a lot about that because I have to say when the theme came out, it struck me as I didn't resonate immediately. But when I think about the word synodal, for example, it strikes me that women religious have been on this journey of participation and creating together for many, many years. And just at a very personal level, I remember the first UISG plenary that I attended in Rome. It seems like many years ago now. What struck me viscerally was the variety of women who were there from many different cultural experiences. It's quite obvious, but it was for me that visceral experience of recognizing, first of all, how small my experience of the world was and how full of diverse experience the world was and is. But you know, when I think of women religious, especially since Vatican II, we have been doing this synodal journey. We changed structures within our congregations. We have worked hard and long at creating meaningful and valuable partnerships with others. And so while it's not everyday language to speak of synodal journey, we know the experience of it. And I think right now, where I hook in to this embracing vulnerability in the synodal journey is the question for us as human beings on the planet right now. That call to respect and embrace diversity and to invite participation. And the primary question, it seems to me, for us now is, how are we walking together on this planet with all of life together?
Thank you, Sister Margot. I was touched by your reference to the assembly, you know, the variety of women religious life. So may I ask you, which is the benefit of this variety at the USG level for each congregation and for your congregation, for instance?
That's a very good question. I think, again, I hook into the word visceral. I mean, we know intellectually that there is variety and diversity. But when you actually sit at a table with women, perhaps representing 8 different countries on the globe, and listen to their experience and how what is significant to them is both unique to their cultural experience and that there is that same common cause of caring and wanting to create life where everyone can belong and feel like they can participate. And of course, this carries over to where I am in my own country, Canada, where there is a huge cry for more diversity with Indigenous peoples, with people of color, BIPOC. Many, many unique experiences calling for more participation.
I think it's more or less the reason why USG is pushing a lot this, you know, the benefit and the richness of this variety. So to be one, but also to be one in this variety. This is very important for us. Let's go back to the word vulnerability. How do you experience vulnerability in your personal life, but also in your congregation, mainly during this COVID time?
Yes, you know, it's interesting, Patricia. Vulnerability seems to be a word that has come forward I've just noticed it in the past few years, actually. I hear it in so many different settings, and it's not a word that I cottoned on to quickly. I think my initial response to it was, okay, we're falling apart. I get that. But as I sit with the word, it takes on a much deeper meaning for me. When I think of vulnerability now, and particularly during this COVID experience where so much is coming to light, I think of stepping onto ground that is not so secure. I think of status quo being shaken. I think of layers of certainty being stripped away. And this applies at a personal, a congregational, and a societal level. For me now, vulnerability goes the word. There is a question underneath it that goes hand in hand with that term. And the question is, what is the new wanting and waiting to reveal itself to us, to me, to us? Which is a little different, actually significantly different from what is the new that we're creating? I still like that question in many ways, but I think the deeper question, the newer question actually, is what is the new that is waiting and wanting to reveal itself to us together? You know, when you think of vulnerability at a personal level, again, it becomes alive and it becomes real. And I know that in some of our conversation before, Patricia, the words vulnerability and fragility were used. And I see them actually as quite distinct. I see fragility as perhaps a part of vulnerability, but they're quite distinct. And I think in religious congregations today, certainly in North America, I'm certainly aware of the growing and physical and mental fragility of many of us. Often much time is spent on selling of properties, mother houses, because they're too large for us. Healthcare concerns become front and center, and treasured ministries are now in the hands of trusted partners. But I've also thought of some other experiences of vulnerability from the Canadian context. And I have to say one of these, which certainly I'm sure everyone is aware of, is our legacy and involvement in residential schools in Canada. And, you know, just this morning, I read in the press a new property where a residential school was, where more bodies of children have been discovered. That's the fourth property so far of a former residential school. We were involved in that. And it's an interesting shift of our identity, because what is also true is that women religious were part of creating educational systems, excellent educational systems. We were its backbone in many places in the world, and certainly in the Canadian context. And now it seems to me we're being asked to embrace the vulnerability of residential schools where we had involvement is also part of who we are. And I think that's also the part of vulnerability, that we don't shy away from that painful coming to terms with, this part of our history also, that somehow we begin to hold it all. And out of that holding it all, develop a deeper compassion. And also, it does help us to create some new choices. It is about a reckoning of what we were blind to at a certain point in our history. And now we see. And actually, that's a very profound experience of vulnerability. Now we see.
So, Margot, in your opinion or in your sensitivity, how we can help life to come up from such experience of sorrow, of grief, of vulnerability,
Mhm.
how can we help life to flourish again?
Mhm. It's an excellent question, Patricia, and I like the way you frame it, because you're not framing it so much as, now what can we do? It's not, now how do we fix this? Because the vulnerability is, it's not about fixing it. It is about, I'm going to stay with your phrase of how can we kind of help life to flourish in this experience. And what we're discovering here in Canada is really, it is about learning to listen to the experience of others and to simply take that in. And my hunch is we're going to be decades doing that. This is not a, once I did a webinar and I heard somebody's experience, although we're going to do our webinars. But it is a new stance of simply paying attention, of simply listening, and let ourselves really hear the experience. And I believe that in that stance, something new is born as we do that. I believe in that stance, we're creating relationship, which actually is the heart of what reconciliation is. And honestly, I mean, the other piece to that is that there is reparation. There is great energy given to, for example, clean water on reservations, and how we can be part of that process. But it is more the stepping back and hearing the experience at a deeper level.
I have the sense that the board of USG, when they chose this title, the intention was to go more in depth during the plenary, mainly when we will meet in Rome, hopefully, um, to go more in depth on this process of helping life to come up from a situation of vulnerability where we are all involved, religious life, lay people, men and women. So I think this is really. I have some other questions for you, and going back again to the possibility that vulnerability becomes a way where life can flourish. Do you have an anecdote or a story that you can share with us about that? For instance, from your mission, congregational, or from your life?
Well, two things come to mind. If you don't mind another story from the Canadian context. Right now, and again, this is a very timely issue for us here in Canada, is Canada has come on the map because of what has been called the so-called truckers' protest, where thousands of people, in particular throughout the country, but especially in our capital, Ottawa, have essentially taken over the city. And this is for over 3 weeks now, where there is total chaos. And I think one of the again, it's a place of vulnerability. I remember waking up in the middle of the night 2 weeks ago when this was beginning, and everything seemed out of control. And honestly, it is out of control right now in Ottawa, our capital. But feeling this anxiety in my body, and what I recognized was, it was my thought, the guardrails are gone. We can't even keep order in our own capital city. But again, I want to hook it into vulnerability, Patricia, because the more we sit with this, and it seems like we're sitting with it quite a long time, there are new questions rising within our own Canadian context. How do we deal with such diversity of opinion? How can we begin to even hear each other across all the differences that seem to be surfacing now? And so I think that is the new that is coming up with all of this. How do we make space for legitimate protest and protect human rights at the same time? So these are some of the new questions. But I have a feeling you're asking also something else.
I now would like to ask you, we move from vulnerability to the synodal journey, you know. So I would like to ask you, how do you experience synodality within your congregation and within the Canadian Church?
Well, I'll start with our congregation. I mean, I think this would be true of congregations across Canada that I know through our UISG constellation in Canada. But for years and years and years, we have had a participatory kind of governance. In other words, that we each get to influence our life together. I think that's been crystal clear. And interestingly, during the pandemic, when we have not been able to meet in person, the other side of that is it has allowed for more participation. We have sisters in Northern Canada, Western Canada, Peru, one sister in the United States. And when we have a congregational meeting in person, partly because of health concerns, not everyone can come. Now, we are having monthly 2-hour Zoom meetings with the congregation. Our first set of 6 Zoom meetings is on anti-racism and diversity. We have over 100 sisters participating. We're a congregation of 173. And so 100 is about getting pretty close to max who could participate in this way. And what I discover is a great energy in our sisters to be part of the conversation, to get their oar in the water, to have their voice, to hear what other people are thinking, to really have influence in shaping who we are together. I think it's another form of belonging that we can meet up in these 2 to 2.5 hours every month. So that's been one of the pluses of the pandemic, actually, in our life together.
So synodality means participation. What other words would you join? Would you put close to synodality according to your experience as women religious?
Yes, I know one of the other phrases used has been walking together. I know it would synodality would mean that I keep wanting to come back to that word, embracing diversity. And I might want to even say learning to embrace diversity. I think of fuller flourishing of our life together as another way to describe it.
Thank you very much for underlining a lot the fact of the variety, the differences, really as a richness. I have another, it's not a question, it's an invitation. You have the opportunity to send a message to the sisters of the USG throughout the world who will listen to your interview. What would you say to them?
Wow, that's quite an invitation. There's something, and I don't have a crystal clear message here, Patricia, but I think I would want to say I just feel so connected to each and to all of you. I just feel such a sense of kinship that gives me hope and gives me courage. So thank you.
Thank you, Sister Margot. I think this is the sense and the meaning of USG, and also for our daily work to be at the service of this connectedness. So thank you very much.